There's a new exhibit at the Detroit Historical Museum that chronicles the history of the Negro Baseball Leagues. The Detroit Stars was one of the Negro League teams that played during a time when African Americans were banned from the major leagues. This year marks the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Detroit Stars, and the museum exhibit features the team's legendary outfielder, Norman "Turkey" Stearns. The Detroit Stars played at Hamtramck Stadium, which still stands today and is scheduled for a major restoration. Here to tell us more are Karen Hudson Samuels, who's vice chair of the Black Historic Sites Committee, Norman "Turkey" Stearns' daughter, Joyce Stearns Thompson, Gary Gillette, who's founder of the Friends of Historic Hamtramck Stadium, and Alana Rue, who is CEO of the Detroit Historical Society. Welcome, all of you, to American Black Journal.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, Karen, I'll start with you. Tell me about this exciting exhibit.
Well, it started when Gary Gillette, who was invited to a meeting of the Black Historic Sites Committee, and he said, well, there is this historic Hamtramck Stadium where one of the few stadiums still left in the country where Negro Leagues were allowed to play. And so from that we got involved because it was a centennial anniversary, 1919. And with the exhibit we get to tell that story of the legendary teams, the players. The exhibit is up through September. So that's kind of how it started, and it really is a chance for the public to be educated about America's pastime.
Yeah.
It's a chapter of history that really this hasn't been told.
Yeah, Gary, you have been involved with this issue for a long time, I know.
About 10 years.
Yeah. Talk about who the Detroit Stars were and why it's sort of significant to try to preserve that history.
Well, the Detroit Stars were founded in 1919. They were the first major Negro League team in Detroit. There would have been black teams coming through town to play white teams mostly, because it was better payday to play white teams, because then white fans would show up, right?
Right.
And in 1920, they were a charter member of the first major Negro League, the Negro National League. So next year we have the centennial of the founding of the Negro National League, which will be a national celebration. The Stars played in Detroit until '31, when they were a victim of the Great Depression along with the league. There was a new Detroit Stars team in '33, lasted a year. A new team in '37 lasted a year. It was really hard during the Depression. Major league teams struggled, and several major league teams almost went bust as well. So it's not peculiar to the Negro Leagues. But you can't tell the history of the African American community in Detroit without talking about the most popular sport, except for boxing, Joe Louis, who was, of course, a hero in Detroit and then an international hero. Baseball, the Negro Leagues were the big deal.
And your father, Turkey Stearns, is somebody who's closely associated with the Stars. It is one of my favorite historical baseball players, black, white, or whatever. Talk about what you remember about your father and him playing in these leagues.
Well, my dad was a great person. Unfortunately, my sister and I were born after he had stopped playing.
Done, yeah.
So, you know, I get to hear the stories from other people, and he's had, all of his inductions have been posthumous. So he died in 1979, and he was inducted into the Afro-American Sports Hall of Fame in 1987, 2000, the National Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, 2007, Michigan Sports Hall of Fame, 2010, Tennessee Sports Hall of Fame. And we visited Kauffman Stadium, where the Kansas City Royals play. They have their own Hall of Fame, and he's inducted in the Cooperstown section. And also the Tigers put a permanent plaque in 2007. So phenomenal athlete. And great father.
Alana, welcome to American Black Journal. This is the first time we're having you here as the new director over there. Talk about the importance of these kinds of exhibits at the museum.
Well, as you know, Stephen, our mission at the Detroit Historical Society is to tell Detroit stories and why they matter. And to have an opportunity like this to tell a story that really matters, that so many people don't know about, you know, is really remarkable. And it's very popular. As Karen said, it's open till the end of September. We're free all summer, so we really hope everyone comes down to Midtown to visit the museum. But this has been a great opportunity for really a remarkable partnership. The Historical Society and the Black Historic Sites Committee have been partners. We both celebrate our centennial in 2021, and the Black Historic Sites Committee celebrates their 50th the same year. So this has been a long-time partnership, but this is the first time that we're doing an exhibition together. And to partner as well with Gary and his group at the Historic Hamtramck Hamtramck Stadium has been, really a great experience for us in pulling together different organizations to tell a story that needs to be told.
Yeah. Gary, tell us what's going on with the restoration of Hamtramck Stadium.
Well, we raised money via patronicity.com social media earlier this year to restore the field, and we're now looking at exactly how to do that. We raised $115,000, which seemed like a lot, but when you start talking about the quality of baseball fields now, isn't necessarily that much. But we hope to have either later this summer, if not certainly next spring, a restored field. The grandstand is millions of dollars. And what we're waiting on there is a new master plan for Veterans Memorial Park in Hamtramck, which includes Hamtramck Stadium and the adjacent facility, Keyworth Stadium, where the Detroit City Football Club plays. A new master plan that ties all that together, and then the city and the school district owns Keyworth, and DCFC and us will be looking for those millions. So the field restoration is important to us. People do play there now. There are vintage baseball games. Many of the local kids play cricket there. There's a cricket pitch in right field, but it's not really suitable for actual games. You know, there's no scoreboards, there's no lines, there's nothing else.
And so is the idea to make it into a modern facility where you can do all of those things?
The idea is to make it into a community facility where people can play cricket and soccer, because that's the sports the kids in Hamtramck play. Also, people can play baseball. We hope to have the high school baseball team playing there next year, as well as vintage baseball teams. And we want the site to be a community asset like it once was, as well as an historic site that will teach people about the history of the African American community in Detroit, Hamtramck, and the Negro Leagues, and the importance to Detroit itself, as well as the black community.
Black Historic Sites Committee, remind viewers of some of the other work that you guys are up to.
Well, one of the things, Alana mentioning an upcoming anniversary, the Black Historic Sites Committee was formed in 1971 by then Councilman Ernest Brown, and with the mission to preserve the history and tell the stories of African Americans. And so some of the other events that we're doing that are related to this exhibit is there is a Negro League film series. And so we have a film coming up on, let me get the date right, June 29th. And the title of the film says a lot about what it's about. Only the Ball Was White. It's a short documentary, and we have a panel afterwards. And Joyce is on the panel, Gary's on the panel, and Mike Tiger Price, and we talk about, in the film it's about what it was like to travel and be a part of the Negro Leagues back in those days. It's narrated by Paul Winfield, but you hear from the actual ball players, you know, their stories of what it was like. So that's an example of another kind of activity. And we have bus tours. We had a bus tour of sites related to black baseball in Detroit, and Joyce said that there is a plaque of her dad on Comerica Park. There is a Michigan historical marker at Hamtramck Stadium, at the stadium itself. And on our bus tour, she and her sister, we also went to their home on Carter Street. So there's a lot of history and activities that we get involved in, just related to this one story itself that's has to be told.
The museum's role in telling that story of Detroit, and then by extension, of course, African American Detroit, is a key pillar, I know, of the work that goes on there too.
It is, absolutely. Well, in this, there are two parts to the story. One is the fun and magic of baseball, and the other is the story of segregation, frankly, right? And so, as we move forward and as I, mature in my role here, it's really important to us at the Detroit Historical Museum that we tell all Detroit stories, and that we're more equitable in the stories that we tell, and that's why partnerships like this are so important to us. I can't tell this story, but Joyce can, right? And the Black Historic Sites Committee can. And so, we invite everyone to come down and really check it out. I think, the students of Detroit, young kids, we were talking earlier, they're not so much into baseball these days, but gosh, it's really about the personal stories of the players where it really hits home. Do you remember your dad talking about not being able to play in the major leagues and what that meant to him?
Yeah, he didn't dwell on that, but he talked about the segregation, the fact that they weren't allowed to play, and he felt that they were as good or better than the players that played in the major leagues. Certainly was, and I know they barnstormed the Detroit Tigers all-star team barnstormed the Detroit Tigers, I think 13 times, and beat them 11 out of 13. My dad was not bitter. I think he was disappointed that he missed out on that opportunity because there was no compensation, you know, the monetary compensation that they deserved, they didn't get.
Yeah, yeah. What do you think he would make of all of the hullabaloo about him now? I mean, he's much more celebrated now than he was then, right?
I've told people before, I think my dad would be in awe because he was a very conservative, low-key, reserved person. So he'd be kind of shocked, because when we went to the Negro Leagues reunion in 1979, and July 4th weekend, he got to see all the guys that were still alive. There were like 10 of them. And my dad had a hearing loss, and so when they were talking to him, he was excited to see them, and then when they realized it was him, Turkey, like they were like, oh, wow. And I got to sit there and watch them talk about how wonderful he was, and it was almost like they kind of like worshiped him almost, you know. But my dad, he didn't care about that.
Yeah.
So I think he'd be happy. He could celebrate all these inductions,
Sure.
the recognition, but he didn't need that.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, you
Go
know,
ahead,
if
Sarah.
people, you know, and that's a great remembrance of your dad, Joyce, but in the exhibit there is a life-size painting. It's really beautifully done. And then one of the bats and balls that he used that Joyce loaned, and some other parts of the exhibit, these graphic wall panels, there's a great timeline. Gary Gillette, principal writer of this content, because he literally has encyclopedic knowledge of baseball. And then there are also women in black baseball. So there's this small panel that just explains and identifies who are the women in black baseball. So we try to cover the gamut. And it's just a fun experience. And you come to the museum, you just have to go through the Gallery of Culture, and you just can't miss it. And just take some time and study it.
Yeah, and it's open till
September 29th.
September, right.
Yeah.
So plenty of time to get down
There
there. to
is,
see it.
absolutely. And a lot of great programming. People can go to our website at detroithistorical.org and see the whole schedule of events.
Yeah.
All
All
through the
right.
summer.
Well, congratulations to all of you, and thanks for being here.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Stephen.